The Bloodline's new monster has arrived. At WWE Backlash 2025, history was made in a moment that sent chills through the arena. Jeff Cobb was officially welcomed into the Bloodline by none other than Rikishi himself. In a powerful ceremony rooted in Samoan heritage and tribal pride, the Olympic powerhouse was crowned the new tribal enforcer, and the WWE landscape may never be the same. This wasn't just a debut. It was a warning. With Solo Sikoa standing tall, Fatu flanking him, and a chilling message from Roman Reigns, Jeff Cobb's induction marked a new era of domination for the Bloodline. The ceremony was filled with fire, respect, and raw intensity. Rikishi's presence gave it weight. His blessing wasn't symbolic, it was a call to arms. Jeff Cobb didn't say much. He didn't need to. His actions did the talking. By the end of the night, bodies were broken, alliances were tested, and the WWE Universe saw firsthand what happens when the Bloodline adds another savage to its ranks. Cobb brings a dangerous mix of legit wrestling pedigree, raw strength, and zero fear. He's not here for spotlight, he's here to enforce. And with Roman Reigns pulling strings from the shadows, this was more than just a show of strength. It was a declaration of war. In this video, we break down everything from the electrifying ceremony and Rikishi's speech to Jeff Cobb's brutal impact and what this means for the future of WWE. Is the Bloodline unstoppable now? How will the locker room respond to this new level of power? And who, if anyone, can stand up to this modern-day dynasty? Plus, we cover backstage reactions, exclusive footage you didn't see on the broadcast, and rumors about what's next for Solo Sikoa and Fatu. There's even buzz about Brock Lesnar, yes, Brock, not taking this power move lightly. The Bloodline has a new monster. And his name is Jeff Cobb. Don't miss this full breakdown of Backlash 2025's most talked about moment. What do you get when you mix Olympic-caliber destruction with the most dominant family in wrestling history? Not a storyline. Not a debut. Not a handshake. You get a war declaration. At Backlash 2025, the game changed. The era shifted. And the world watched as Jeff Cobb, an absolute tank of a man, was anointed by none other than Rikishi in a ceremony dripping with legacy, pride, and brute finality. This wasn't just a debut. This was a coronation. A statement. A warning. The Bloodline didn't just recruit a new enforcer. They forged a weapon. Let's rewind just a moment. Because to understand the weight of this move, this seismic shift, you need to understand the pressure cooker the Bloodline has been living in. For nearly 4 years, the Bloodline has ruled WWE with a steel grip and cold-blooded efficiency. Roman Reigns, the tribal chief, orchestrated a dynasty unlike anything wrestling has seen since the Attitude Era. Unified titles. Historic main events. Betrayals. Blood. Championships defended, and brothers broken. But in 2024, the tides began to shift. Roman's appearances became sporadic. His influence, once god-tier, now filtered through emissaries like Solo Sikoa and Paul Heyman. The Usos fractured. Jay walked. Jimmy fell. And suddenly, the empire Roman built looked like it was standing on cracked foundation. Enter Fatu. Enter Solo as the interim leader. Enter quiet chaos. And then, enter Backlash 2025. A premium live event already loaded with high-stakes matches and dream confrontations. But no one expected the real story to happen outside the ring. No one saw the Bloodline ceremony coming. And certainly, no one predicted the introduction of Jeff Cobb, the man now known as the Tribal Enforcer. This video will walk you through every detail of what happened. From the symbology behind the ceremony to the terrifying legitimacy of Cobb's background. From the reaction of the WWE locker room to what Roman Reigns really thinks. And we'll explore a question fans everywhere are now asking: is Jeff Cobb here to protect the Bloodline, or to conquer it? The arena in San Juan was packed. The crowd came for chaos. They got ceremony. Midway through the show, the lights cut. The Tron lit up with tribal symbols, glyphs, fire, chanting. The air changed. This wasn't just another WWE segment. This felt older. Deeper. You could feel the weight of culture pressing through the screen. And then Rikishi emerged. The legend. The elder. The father of Solo and the Usos. A man who rarely appears unless it matters. Dressed in traditional Samoan attire, he stood silent for almost a full minute as the crowd roared, confused, reverent. Behind him, Solo Sikoa. Jacob Fatu. But that wasn't all. What happened next caught every viewer off guard. A slow war drum began. Then, from the side ramp, not the main stage, came Jeff Cobb. No music. No pyro. No catchphrase. Just presence. Power. And a purpose. And the look in Solo's eyes? Pure certainty. Cobb walked straight to Rikishi, bowed low, then stood tall as Rikishi painted tribal markings across Cobb's chest. The meaning was clear. This wasn't a tag team signing. This wasn't backup. This was a ritual. In Bloodline lore, joining isn't about popularity or even success. You have to belong. You have to be worthy. And you have to be dangerous. Jeff Cobb checks every box. A former Olympic wrestler for Guam. An NJPW beast with wins over some of the biggest names in the sport. A man with no interest in gimmicks, only in domination. His strength is off the charts. His control in the ring is terrifying. And his demeanor? Calculated. Cold. Warrior-like. Rikishi didn't just hand him a spot. He passed down the legacy of force. In doing so, he said to the world, "This is our new hammer. And we will break what stands in our way." Where was Roman? He wasn't there physically. But his presence loomed over every second of the ceremony. A pre-recorded message aired right after Cobb's induction. Roman's face, calm, quiet, lethal. When I return, I expect loyalty. I expect dominance. And I expect silence from our enemies. Pause. Jeff Cobb, enforce it. 8 words that shook the locker room. 8 words that reminded fans why Roman doesn't need to raise his voice to command armies. But the subtext was louder than the speech. Roman is watching. He may be waiting in the shadows. But make no mistake, he still holds the strings. Or does he? Because right now, Solo is leading the charge. And he's doing it his way, with Jacob Fatu, with strategic brutality, and now with Cobb at his right hand. Roman didn't place Cobb. Solo did. And that's where the real story begins. To the fans, the Bloodline ceremony was epic. Cinematic. Cool. To the locker room? It was a direct threat. Every major faction took notice. Judgment Day. Imperium. Even the newly reformed Hurt Business. They weren't watching a cool segment. They were watching a power consolidation. Cobb isn't here to smile and stand in the background like some bodyguard cliché. He's here to break spines, silence talkers, and send messages written in bruises. This is not a faction revival. This is a tribal army. That's the part casual fans miss. This isn't the Bloodline restarting. This is the Bloodline entering Phase 3. Phase 1 was about dominance. Roman as champion. Usos unified. Phase 2 was chaos. Betrayals. Walkouts. Leadership gaps. Now, in Phase 3, we see a militarized, sharpened version. And Cobb is the blade. You don't bring in someone like Jeff Cobb unless you plan to cut deep. So here's what we're going to break down next. The real significance of Rikishi's role and why that changes everything. Who Jeff Cobb really is, beyond the highlights. How Solo Sikoa is quietly becoming more dangerous than even Roman Reigns. What this move means for the entire WWE landscape, from the titles to the turf wars. And why some insiders are calling this the beginning of a civil war inside the bloodline. Stick with us. Because once you understand what happened at Backlash, you'll realize this wasn't just a moment. It was a message. And the message is simple: fall in line, or get enforced. Wrestling factions come and go. Stables rise and fall. DX evolution. The Shield. The NWO. But the bloodline? It isn't just a faction. It's a family. A real one. Bound by blood, forged in culture, and built on a legacy stretching across generations. Before Roman Reigns ever sat on his throne, before Solo Sikoa stepped into a ring, before the Usos perfected the art of tag team warfare, there was the Anoa'i dynasty. And it started with a rule passed from generation to generation: family eats first. Let's talk about how that rule built an empire, and nearly tore it apart. To understand the bloodline's impact on WWE, you have to go back. Way back. Back to High Chief Peter Maivia, a Samoan icon who broke barriers in the 70s. Back to Afa and Sika, the original wild Samoans, known for their brutal, unrelenting style and terrifying aura. They weren't characters. They were a force. Fast forward to the 1990s, and that same lineage gave us Yokozuna, a former WWE champion and Hall of Famer. Rikishi, who danced his way into fans' hearts but slammed his way through his opponents. Umaga, the Samoan bulldozer who made destruction look poetic. The Rock, yes, that Rock, arguably the most successful crossover star in wrestling history. But here's the twist most fans don't realize: almost every single one of those legends is connected by blood. That's not a coincidence. That's by design. This family doesn't just pass down moves. They pass down legacy, pride, and responsibility. Wrestling isn't a job for them. It's a birthright. In 2012, Roman Reigns debuted in WWE as the powerhouse of the Shield. He was green, raw, but electric. By 2015, WWE had made their choice: Roman was the future. But the fans weren't ready. They booed. They rebelled. They pushed back. Roman was talented, but something felt manufactured. The big dog era didn't land. The promos were forced. The image was overproduced. Then 2020 happened. Roman Reigns disappeared due to health concerns during the pandemic. And when he returned, everything changed. He didn't smile. He didn't pander. He didn't ask for cheers. He came back with Paul Heyman at his side, and a new title, the Tribal Chief. This wasn't just a gimmick. It was a power shift. Roman took the mic and made it clear: he wasn't asking for acknowledgement. He was demanding it. It began with Jey Uso. Roman's cousin. His equal, until he wasn't. They feuded. Roman broke him, mentally, physically, emotionally. Until Jey called him what Roman had been waiting to hear: "You're the Tribal Chief." From that moment on, Jey became the right-hand man. Jimmy Uso followed, reluctantly at first, but family is gravity. Soon, Roman stood in the ring, flanked by both Usos, holding 2 world titles. This was the Bloodline 1.0 era. Dominance. Unity. Ruthless precision. They crushed everyone. Daniel Bryan? Beaten and exiled. Edge? Speared into silence. Brock Lesnar? Slain multiple times. The Bloodline didn't just win matches. They turned WWE into a monarchy. But nothing perfect stays untouched. Jey began to question the leadership. Jimmy grew defiant. Roman's control became obsession. The same fire that built the Bloodline started to burn its own foundation. At Night of Champions 2023, it snapped. Jimmy turned on Roman. Jey walked away. Solo Sikoa, the silent youngest brother, stepped up. But even his loyalty began to look conditional. Roman was no longer a leader. He was a dictator. And the people he ruled? They weren't soldiers anymore. They were hostages. This was Bloodline 2.0. Still dominant. Still dangerous. But no longer united. Solo Sikoa isn't like the others. He doesn't talk much. He doesn't flex. He doesn't need chants or fireworks. He shows up, wrecks people, and leaves. He was introduced as the Street Champion, a nickname that sounded cool. Until you realized it was a warning. Solo doesn't play games. And more importantly, he's loyal to the mission, not the man. When the bloodline crumbled, Solo stayed. When Jay walked, Solo stood. When Roman vanished, Solo took control. And that's where everything began to shift. Because Solo didn't just hold the line. He started drawing a new one. Jacob Fatu is a name that hardcore fans have been shouting for years. One of the most athletic, unhinged, and charismatic Samoan wrestlers of his generation, Jacob ruled MLW with fire and chaos. Everyone expected him to eventually join WWE. No one expected him to be dropped into the core of the Bloodline war. But Solo did. Solo brought him in. And just like that, a new power structure formed: Solo, the commander. Jacob, the wild card. Roman, the absent god. And a vacuum of power waiting to be filled. The fans saw it. The announcers hinted at it. The bloodline wasn't being preserved. It was being reprogrammed. This is where history meets now. With Roman's absence becoming the norm and Solo's vision taking over, the bloodline needed something new. Not flash. Not tag team chemistry. They needed raw, dominant, physical fear. And who fits that mold better than Jeff Cobb? Think about what the bloodline lost: the Usos, speed and tag finesse. Roman's full-time leadership. Heyman's daily manipulation. What they gained with Cobb was different. Unmatched physicality. Real-world grappling credibility. A presence that speaks louder than any promo. This wasn't about replacing Roman. It was about redefining what power looks like. WWE has seen factions. Dominant ones. Dangerous ones. But what makes the bloodline different is that they've become generational storytelling. It's not just about titles or wins. It's about legacy as a weapon. And with every phase, the weapon has changed. Phase 1, Roman as the tribal chief, backed by loyalty. Phase 2, civil war, manipulation, chaos. Phase 3, ruthless structure, cultural authority, and new muscle. Jeff Cobb wasn't just inserted into a storyline. He was selected by tradition. Rikishi didn't bless him as a new member. He consecrated him as a warrior. And with that, the bloodline didn't just evolve. They doubled down. Here's what you need to understand about this faction: it's built on respect, but enforced by violence. It's rooted in culture, but operates like a machine. The bloodline is not about popularity. It's not about storylines. It's about who gets to speak for the family. And at Backlash 2025, the family made it clear: Roman may still be the tribal chief. Solo may be the field general. Jacob may be the savage soul. But Jeff Cobb? He's the hammer. And from now on, when the bloodline says, "Acknowledge us," they don't just want your respect. They want your silence. When Jeff Cobb walked into Backlash 2025, he didn't need any of it. The man's presence spoke for itself. His arms, carved out of granite. His chest, a wall of power. His walk, slow and deliberate, like a tank with purpose. And behind his eyes? Calculation. No flash. No showmanship. Just a promise: someone's about to get hurt. And yet, unless you've been watching New Japan, Ring of Honor, or the indie scene like a hawk, you might be wondering, who is Jeff Cobb? Where did he come from? And why is WWE handing him the keys to the most dominant faction in the company? Here's the truth, Jeff Cobb isn't new. He's just undeniable now. Before wrestling rings, there were mats. Before roars of a crowd, there was the focused silence of a tournament hall. Jeff Cobb is an Olympian. Not just a good wrestler. Not just a strong guy. An Olympic-caliber Greco-Roman wrestler who represented Guam in the 2004 Olympics. That's not a gimmick. That's a fact. You can't fake Olympic training. You can't shortcut the hours of pressure cooker conditioning, the grind, the pain, the discipline. And you don't just walk into the Olympic Games. It's earned. Through suffering. Through repetition. Through an obsession with breaking your opponents while using pure technique. Jeff Cobb isn't flashy because he doesn't have to be. His foundation is real. This isn't someone who learned how to bump. This is someone who learned how to break people and control them at their core. After the Olympics, Cobb didn't take the common path. He could have coasted into coaching. He could have disappeared into quiet success. Instead, he decided to take his talents to the world of professional wrestling. But unlike other big men, Cobb didn't lean on size alone. He built a style that mixed mat-based discipline with sheer violence. Picture this, a man who can execute exploder suplexes with perfect form on anyone. A man who can deadlift 280-pound opponents like they're gym bags. A man who can move like a cruiserweight but hit like a heavyweight freight train. In the world of pro wrestling, that's rare. In the bloodline? That's perfect. Jeff Cobb didn't cut his teeth in WWE. He wasn't born in the Performance Center. He didn't start on the main roster. He earned his scars in some of the most unforgiving environments in the world. Ring of Honor, where he became ROH World Television Champion, bulldozing through their top names. PWG, Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, where he earned a reputation as an absolute freak of nature, dominating their elite talent. New Japan Pro Wrestling, NJPW, where he evolved into a monster. Not just winning, but outlasting warriors like Okada, Tanahashi, Naito, and more. In NJPW, Cobb wasn't treated like a novelty. He was booked as an apex predator. He joined the United Empire, a faction known for its athleticism and precision. But even there, Cobb stood out. Not just because of what he did, but because of how he did it. Every match had the same pattern. Cobb walks in, no words. Opponent flails. Cobb catches them, deadlifts them, and ends the conversation. Let's break it down in pure mechanics. Tour of the Islands, Cobb's signature finisher. A brutal swinging power slam that flips an opponent end over end with devastating force. It's not just a slam. It's a statement. Every rotation screams you are no longer in control. Release German suplex, not just for cruiserweights. Cobb has delivered this to 300-pounders, dropping them on their shoulders like rag dolls. Standing moonsault, at 260-plus pounds, this should be impossible. For Cobb, it's routine. Belly-to-belly suplexes, overhead throws, deadlift slams, all done with Olympic-level form. Every time Cobb wrestles, he doesn't just entertain. He demoralizes. Let's get real. The bloodline isn't about jokes, moments, or fan service. It's about power, loyalty, and message sending. Jeff Cobb checks every box. He doesn't chase clout. He doesn't speak unless it matters. He doesn't lose focus. He understands hierarchy. In the Olympics, you win or you're forgotten. In the bloodline, you serve or you're exiled. Cobb fits because he understands the structure of fear. And he thrives inside it. He's not a drama king. He's a system weapon. Point him at a problem and he removes it. Quietly. Violently. Permanently. That's why Cobb's entrance at Backlash didn't need drama. His silence was intimidation. His calm was arrogance, not the cocky kind, but the kind that comes from knowing that no one in the room can stop you. He didn't have to beat someone up that night to prove anything. The ceremony proved it. Rikishi's approval wasn't just symbolic. It was a cultural transfer of authority. In that moment, Cobb wasn't joining the bloodline. He was becoming part of its DNA. Sources backstage have described the vibe as shook. Cobb has been talked about in WWE circles for years. There were rumors in 2020, then again in 2022. But nothing stuck, until now. And the reason? Simple. WWE was waiting for the right story. The right moment. The right vacuum of power. Now that Roman's part-time, and the bloodline needs physical credibility more than ever, Cobb is the missing piece. Reports say multiple wrestlers are already reworking their movesets in anticipation of working with him. You can't plan for Cobb. You can only try to survive him. There's a long history of powerful enforcers in wrestling: Umaga, Batista, Diesel, Kane, Samoa Joe. All monsters in their own right. But here's the difference with Cobb: he doesn't just use size. He uses technique. He isn't just a heavy. He's a tactician with the strength of a demolition team. Most big men get by with theatrics and a couple of slams. Cobb can chain wrestle, reverse submissions, suplex you 12 ways, and still make it look effortless. He's not here to play a character. He's here to execute. The bloodline has had loyalty. It's had strategy. It's had charisma. What it didn't have, until now, was a pure, unrelenting weapon. Cobb is that weapon. He doesn't need mic time. He doesn't need fanfare. He doesn't even need a reason. All he needs is permission, from Solo, from Roman, from the legacy itself. And once he gets that, the question isn't will he win? It's, how long will you last? WWE fans are used to surprise appearances. A legend's music hits. The crowd erupts. There's nostalgia. A pop. Maybe a speech or a stink face if we're lucky. But at Backlash 2025, when Rikishi emerged, there were no gimmicks. No dancing. No nostalgia trip. What walked out onto that stage wasn't a Hall of Famer. It was a chief. A father. A judge. And suddenly, the air wasn't entertainment anymore. It was legacy. Rikishi didn't come to pop the crowd. He came to legitimize something far more important than a match. He came to bless the bloodline's next phase with cultural weight. And that's why his presence matters more than anything else that happened that night. Let's strip away the gimmick for a moment. Yes, Rikishi is one of the most recognizable characters in WWE history. Yes, he made fans laugh with his moves, entrances, and over-the-top theatrics. But outside the ring? Rikishi is Solo Fatu Jr. A cornerstone of the Anoa'i family, brother to Umaga, cousin to Roman Reigns, and father to Jimmy Uso, Jey Uso, and Solo Sikoa. He is not just part of the bloodline. He helped create it. His voice in Samoan wrestling culture matters. He's seen it all, the highs of main events and the lows of locker room politics. He understands better than anyone what loyalty, hierarchy, and honor mean to that family. So when Rikishi enters a WWE ring and says someone belongs, that's not a cameo. That's a rite of passage. Let's talk about the ceremony at Backlash. There was no pyro. No upbeat music. No Titantron celebrating Rikishi's achievements. Instead, Rikishi walked in silence. He was dressed not as a performer, but as a tribal elder, flowing black and red garments, traditional textures, and a serious face that refused to smile. Behind him stood Fatu and Solo Sikoa, both silent, both staring forward. And then came Cobb, walking not toward glory, but toward judgment. This wasn't WWE writing a segment. This was the Anoa'i family writing a chapter. The visuals were surgical. Rikishi stood at the center. The balance between past and future. Solo stood left, the acting general of the bloodline. Jacob stood right, the unpredictable wild card. Cobb knelt in front, the offering. The chosen. The soon-to-be enforcer. And when Rikishi dipped his fingers in black tribal paint and marked Cobb's chest, fans watching saw a cool moment. But anyone who understood Samoan tradition? They saw a blessing. A form of initiation. A warrior being accepted into the tribe. Here's the difference casual viewers might have missed: Rikishi didn't invite Cobb into the bloodline. He didn't welcome him like a guest or induct him like a Hall of Famer. He blessed him. That's a massive difference. An invitation is temporary. Conditional. A blessing is permanent. An endorsement that carries family weight and cultural legitimacy. It means Cobb isn't just another body in a stable. He's now part of the family's future. That's why Rikishi's presence was essential. Without him, Cobb's debut could be seen as a strategic move by Solo or even a replacement part in a war machine. With him, Cobb became a living extension of legacy. Throughout the ceremony, Rikishi barely said a word. One short phrase to Cobb. A gesture toward Solo. That was it. But in cultures where respect and hierarchy matter, silence is never empty. Rikishi didn't need to say much because his presence said everything. When the elder speaks only once, the message is sacred. And in that moment, the message was this: I've seen what this family needs. I see what it's missing. Jeff Cobb is that answer. It was more powerful than a speech. Because when a father gives his son a weapon, and the son accepts, the war becomes official. This is the first time since Roman's transformation into tribal chief that we've seen someone from the elder generation of the Anoa'i family take part in-universe in the bloodline story. Paul Heyman is an advisor. Roman is the leader. Solo is the soldier. But Rikishi? He's the voice of history. And with his blessing of Cobb, the bloodline just made a critical shift. They went from being a modern faction built on dominance to a multi-generational institution built on ritual, blood, and ancient power. This changes the game. This makes the bloodline bigger than Roman. It ties them directly to Samoan heritage and storytelling tradition, something no other faction in WWE history has successfully done. So why now? Why did Rikishi wait? Why didn't he appear when Roman crowned himself chief? Why didn't he stop the implosion between his sons? Because this moment mattered more. Roman made himself tribal chief. Jay walked away. Jimmy broke. But with Solo rising and the bloodline fragmenting, the family didn't just need leadership. It needed order. It needed a code. And Jeff Cobb? He's not part of the problem. He's the solution. By stepping in now, Rikishi wasn't picking sides. He was restoring the system. He made it clear, this is still our family. This is still our code. And this is how we handle threats, with force, respect, and silence. What we witnessed at Backlash wasn't just a new member joining the bloodline. It was a generational passing of the torch. Rikishi didn't just welcome Jeff Cobb. He armed him. And in doing so, he made one thing crystal clear: the bloodline isn't Roman Reigns. The bloodline isn't a gimmick. The bloodline is a legacy. A legacy now enforced by Olympic hands, tribal blood, and a promise sealed in silence. So if you're still asking whether Cobb belongs, you're already behind. Because when Rikishi steps into the ring and says, "This is our enforcer," there's only one response left: yes, Chief. Backlash 2025 didn't need this. It already had championship matches, grudge feuds, sold-out attendance, and world-class talent. But WWE didn't end Act 2 of the night with pyro. They ended it with ritual. No match. No bell. No pinfall. Just fire. Drums. Silence. Paint. Authority. Because what unfolded in the center of the ring that night wasn't a segment in the way WWE fans are used to. It was a rite of passage, and it had one message: the bloodline has evolved. And this is your final warning. The induction of Jeff Cobb into the most dangerous faction in wrestling wasn't just story progression. It was a cultural collision between Samoan warriorhood and WWE spectacle, done with reverence, power, and strategic symbolism. The arena lights dimmed, not suddenly, but deliberately. The crowd noise died down, replaced by an ambient rumble. Then came the first beat of the war drum. One deep thud. Then another. And another, growing faster, louder, until the stage was bathed in fiery red and gold lighting, flickering like a volcanic blaze. This wasn't an entrance. It was a summoning. Samoan war chants played, low, guttural, rhythmically timed. Not words most fans could understand, but words that carried weight. Respect. Challenge. Power. These were the meanings behind the sounds. Then Rikishi appeared. He didn't come out to his usual music. There was no too cool nostalgia. No sunglasses. No dancing. Rikishi emerged in ceremonial black and red robes, with traditional Samoan beads hanging across his shoulders, bare-chested beneath, and a stern expression that said everything. In his hand, a small bowl of black paint. On his face, the look of someone about to pass judgment. Behind him stood two shadows, Fatu and Solo Sikoa, motionless, dressed in muted traditional gear mixed with tactical combat elements. This wasn't cosplay. This was ancestral fusion with militarized dominance. And finally, stepping out from the side, not from the entrance ramp, came Jeff Cobb. Cobb didn't walk to music. He walked to silence. The crowd's reactions turned from confusion to awe. Some cheered. Others just watched. He wore no shirt, only a lava-inspired waist wrap and black MMA-style shorts. His body bore no paint. No symbols. He was a blank canvas, for now. And yet, he didn't look nervous. He looked certain. He walked to the ring like a man answering a call, not making an entrance. And when he reached the steel steps, he didn't roll under the ropes. He climbed in slow, stood before Rikishi, and knelt. This wasn't performance. This was obedience. And Solo Sikoa, watching from the corner, gave the slightest nod. Rikishi stepped forward and dipped 2 fingers into the bowl of black paint. He reached out and pressed his hand against Cobb's chest, right over the heart. Then his palm, leaving a perfect imprint. A mark of initiation. A symbol passed down through Samoan warrior rites. This symbol doesn't have a literal English meaning. But culturally, it represents, I see you. I accept you. You are now of us. It is a warrior's welcome. It is a silent oath. Once the paint was applied, Rikishi raised Cobb's hand to his own forehead, a blessing gesture used in both spiritual and tribal rites in Polynesian cultures. Then he stepped back. For the first time that night, Solo took the mic. His voice was steady, low, and firm. This is Jeff Cobb. He is not a recruit. He is not a backup. He is our weapon. Short. Final. Commanding. And the crowd? Silent. Hooked. Watching this all unfold like they were witnessing a blood oath. Then he turned to Cobb. You enforce our legacy. You carry our name. You break what stands in front of us. He handed Cobb a black necklace of carved bone, similar to the one Roman wore when he first took the mantle of tribal chief. It wasn't gaudy. It wasn't showy. It was ancient. And as soon as Cobb placed it around his neck, the lighting in the arena flashed to blood red. The war drums boomed once more. The camera pulled in on Rikishi, who raised his hand and spoke one sentence. The line has been restored. What happened next was surreal. There was no exit music. No post-ceremony match. No fireworks. The 4 men stood in the ring, Rikishi, Solo, Jacob, and now Cobb. And then, they just walked out. one by one. Rikishi first. Then Solo. Then Fatu. And Cobb, last. The message? This wasn't the end of something. This was the beginning of a campaign. In most WWE moments, the crowd roars. Cheers. Boos. Pops. But during and after the ceremony, there was a rare thing. Suspenseful silence. Not because people weren't interested, but because they understood something was happening that wasn't just storyline. This was WWE tapping into real-world reverence, not for cheap heat, but to deepen the mythos of the bloodline. Even fans unfamiliar with Polynesian traditions could feel it. This was sacred. And now, it was dangerous. WWE is often at its best when it drops the clichés and goes full theatrical with intention. What we saw at Backlash was a prime example of this. The ceremony fused legitimate Samoan cultural elements with modern wrestling narrative. It gave Jeff Cobb's arrival weight, not just excitement. It reinforced the bloodline's connection to heritage, not just dominance. And above all, it re-established the bloodline not as a wrestling group, but as a living dynasty. The most important takeaway? This ceremony wasn't done for applause. It wasn't done to hype Jeff Cobb. It was done because the bloodline needed to be reborn. And only a ceremony like this, with elements of ritual, obedience, tribal honor, and family authority, could make that rebirth feel real. This was not just WWE telling you Cobb matters. This was WWE showing you that Cobb belongs, not just on the roster, but in the story of a real blood legacy that runs through decades of wrestling history. And now that he's been blessed, painted, and given a role, the enforcer is no longer waiting. The bloodline's warpath has officially begun. Not a word. Not a smirk. Not a single unnecessary gesture. That's how Solo Sikoa and Jacob Fatu stood throughout the entire Backlash ceremony. In a business filled with loud entrances and forced hype, these two men said nothing, and still controlled every eye in the building. Because in the bloodline, power doesn't have to speak. It stands. It watches. It measures. And on that night, what they were measuring was Jeff Cobb. The question wasn't just, is Cobb joining? It was deeper. Does the enforcer earn the nod of the blood's most ruthless hands? And by the time the paint dried on Cobb's chest, we had the answer. When Roman Reigns stepped back, WWE didn't immediately name a successor. But the actions of the last year have made it clear, Solo Sikoa is now the man steering the ship. Not in words. Not in promos. But in every calculated, brutal action he takes. Solo has become the unshakable spine of the bloodline. The bridge between its golden age and its next era. And if you're looking for proof? Look at who introduced Jeff Cobb to the family. It wasn't Heyman. It wasn't Roman. It was Solo. He didn't just give Cobb a position. He gave him purpose. During the ceremony, Solo barely blinked. He kept his hands folded, his shoulders squared, and his eyes locked on Cobb. And when Rikishi applied the mark and the drums stopped, Solo moved first. He stepped forward, handed Cobb the bone-carved necklace. A symbol of violent loyalty, and gave the only approval that mattered. A nod. Nothing more. But that nod? It was a coronation. Here's the game most fans don't realize is happening. Solo is building his own structure. Roman built the bloodline around loyalty and fear. He broke family to control family. Solo's version? It's more militaristic. More strategic. Less drama. More damage. And Jeff Cobb fits that mold perfectly. Cobb doesn't complain. He doesn't tweet. He doesn't need direction. He enforces. And Solo understands the value of a weapon that thinks like a soldier, not a superstar. In essence, Cobb is the executioner Solo never had when the family fractured. And now that he does? The message is loud, the line has not just been restored. It's been armed. If Solo is the general, Jacob Fatu is the ticking time bomb. The former MLW World Champion has long been called one of the best unsigned talents in the business. Now that he's with WWE and fully embedded in the bloodline, he's made one thing very clear: he doesn't follow. He destroys. But here's the twist: Fatu didn't show resistance to Cobb. He didn't posture. He didn't try to steal the spotlight. He stood stone still. He watched the ceremony. And then, when Cobb was blessed, he gave a short, unsettling grin. Why? Because Jacob recognizes monsters. He's been one his whole career. Fatu and Cobb may not be best friends. They may never tag together. They may never share a strategy meeting. But what they share is a violent language. They both wrestled in environments where chaos isn't just an aesthetic, it's currency. They both rely on instinct, power, and pain. And they both serve a cause larger than themselves, the legacy of dominance. So when Jacob Fatu grinned at Cobb, that wasn't approval. It was recognition. You understand what this war demands. And I trust you to break bones when I'm not around. That's not camaraderie. That's battlefield respect. Let's step back and look at what we're now seeing inside the bloodline. We've gone from a family of brothers to a triangle of controlled destruction. Solo Sikoa, strategic violence. Cold calculation. Minimal emotion. Jacob Fatu, wildcard brutality. Unpredictable energy. Pure chaos. Jeff Cobb, disciplined enforcement. Tactical pain. Surgical force. This isn't a tag team. It's a formation. Solo in command. Fatu as the chaotic swing. Cobb as the sledgehammer. And if Roman returns? He's not returning to a family. He's returning to a machine. During the ceremony, the details were everything. Watch it again. You'll notice, Solo never looks at the crowd. His gaze is fixed on Cobb and Rikishi, the transfer of authority. Fatu shifts his stance only once, when Rikishi places the paint. That's when he leans in slightly, eyes narrow, like a predator seeing his reflection. Neither man smiles. Neither looks surprised. They act like this was inevitable. Because to them, this wasn't a twist. This was a strategy years in the making. And now, it's live. The bloodline used to be a family bound by tribal loyalty and title belts. Now? It's a war council. And every seat is filled by someone ready to destroy on command. With Solo leading. Fatu roaming. And Cobb enforcing. There is no weak link anymore. No Jay to hesitate. No Jimmy to betray. No Roman to overshadow. Just 3 men, focused, armed, and immune to doubt. Solo Sikoa and Jacob Fatu didn't cheer when Cobb was initiated. They didn't shake his hand. They didn't celebrate. Because this wasn't a party. It was a recruitment of necessity. And their silence? It told us what we needed to know: Jeff Cobb passed. The bloodline is fortified. And war is not coming. War is already here. The tribal chief wasn't there. No entrance. No pyro. No acknowledge me. Roman Reigns, the man who built the bloodline into WWE's most dominant force in decades, was absent at the moment when the family took its most dramatic turn yet. But his shadow? It was everywhere. From the moment Rikishi entered the arena to the second Jeff Cobb stood with paint on his chest and a war necklace around his neck, Roman's presence hung heavy like a judge behind a curtain. Because in WWE, you don't need to be in the building to control the room, not when your legacy is built on fear, silence, and precision. And then, as Cobb stood tall, the lights dimmed. And the tribal chief finally spoke. No flashy entrance. No music. Just a screen. Black. Simple. Minimal. Then the camera faded in, tight on Roman Reigns' face. No smile. No warmth. No anger. Just that familiar dead stare, a slight glint of disdain behind his eyes. He looked like a man who wasn't impressed, but didn't need to be. He wasn't wearing a suit. No title belt over his shoulder. Just a plain black t-shirt, wet hair draped over his shoulders. He took a breath. And in 21 words, he flipped the balance of power inside the bloodline. When I return, I expect loyalty. I expect dominance. And I expect silence from our enemies. Pause, Jeff Cobb, enforce it. Then the screen cut to black. No fade out. No reaction. Just darkness. Roman's message lasted under a minute. But the silence afterward said everything. Let's break this down. He didn't acknowledge Solo. He didn't thank Rikishi. He didn't praise Fatu. He didn't even say welcome to Cobb. Instead, he gave orders. 3 demands: loyalty, not love, not faith. Just obedience. Dominance, not victory, but absolute control. Silence, not trash talk, not warfare. Just the absence of defiance. Then, the only person he mentioned by name? Jeff Cobb. Not our enforcer. Not the new brother. Just, Jeff Cobb, enforce it. It was cold. Detached. Almost surgical. Like a warlord authorizing a drone strike. What makes Roman terrifying isn't his strength, it's his control. And even in his absence, he's still pulling strings. This wasn't a power vacuum. It was a test. Roman gave no instructions ahead of Backlash. He didn't show up. He let Solo, Rikishi, and the others make moves. Then he showed his face after the decision was made. Like a god judging the faithful. And by addressing Cobb directly, he wasn't just welcoming him. He was claiming him. But make no mistake, this wasn't a warm embrace. This was Roman staking his flag, reminding everyone that the bloodline is still his domain, whether he's in the ring or not. Backstage sources say Solo didn't flinch when the video played. He stood still. Watching. Listening. Processing. If he took offense to Roman's lack of acknowledgement, he didn't show it. But that's the thing with Solo, he doesn't show what he's thinking. Fatu, on the other hand, reportedly laughed backstage when the video cut. Not disrespectfully. Just, amused. Because when you know chaos is coming, the build-up becomes entertainment. The truth is, Roman's video didn't settle anything. It added tension. Unspoken challenges. A sense of looming confrontation. Let's not kid ourselves. There's no version of this story where Solo builds an army, installs an enforcer, and claims authority, without eventually facing down Roman. The seeds are planted. Solo didn't ask for permission before bringing Cobb in. He didn't ask Roman for orders. He took action. Roman's video wasn't a thank you. It was a reminder. You may have moved pieces. But the board is still mine. And Solo? He's playing a longer game. There's tension. There's inevitability. But not yet. Because right now, Solo needs Cobb. And Roman knows that. Which is why he's letting the pieces move, for now. Here's the most intriguing part of this entire situation. Jeff Cobb is now caught between 2 centers of power. Solo Sikoa brought him in, initiated him, handed him the necklace. Rikishi blessed him with legacy and paint. Roman Reigns stamped him with expectation. So now the question becomes, who does Cobb really serve? Is he Solo's enforcer? Or Roman's weapon? Or just the man who breaks bones for the highest authority in the room? Cobb may not speak much. But his actions in the weeks ahead will reveal everything. Because eventually, he'll be forced to choose. And someone will take offense. The internet exploded the moment Roman's video aired. Fans began dissecting every pause, every inflection, every unspoken slight. Was Roman throwing shade at Solo? Is Roman angry they did this without him? Did he just hijack Solo's plan and make Cobb his own? Even longtime WWE veterans reportedly felt the weight of the promo backstage. It wasn't long. It wasn't loud. But it was real. Roman's return is no longer just an eventuality. It's now a ticking power struggle. Roman Reigns didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need to scream about betrayal. Didn't need to threaten violence. Didn't even raise a finger. All he did was appear. Speak. And vanish. And that was enough. Because in the world of the bloodline, presence isn't power. Command is. And Roman Reigns still commands the battlefield. But here's the twist, Solo is now commanding the troops. Cobb is marching. Fatu is circling. And Roman? He's watching his empire move without him. The real war? It's not coming from outside the bloodline anymore. It's coming from within. Wrestling factions are built on roles. You've got the leader. The mouthpiece. The technician. The muscle. But the bloodline structure isn't copied from wrestling blueprints. It's modeled after a tribal council of warriors, with each role rooted in tradition and purpose. And one of the most feared roles in that system? The enforcer. This isn't just the big guy who throws people around. In the bloodline, the enforcer is the blade, the embodiment of violence. The one who doesn't talk strategy, doesn't get involved in politics, doesn't seek glory. They exist for one reason, to punish disrespect. And at Backlash 2025, Jeff Cobb became that blade. But to understand why that matters, you have to know who held that position before him. And what happened to those who failed. When people talk about the prototype for the bloodline enforcer, one name echoes louder than most, Umaga. He was brutal. Unrelenting. Unbothered by consequence. Managed by Armando Estrada, then aligned with Vince McMahon, Umaga was the first to truly carry the aura of ancestral wrath. He didn't speak. He didn't smile. He destroyed. Umaga wasn't there to win championships, though he did. He was there to make sure people knew that violating Samoan pride came with a cost. When Umaga walked to the ring, fans didn't think match. They thought ritual beating. Before he was tribal chief, Roman played the role of enforcer in the Shield. No promos. No politics. Just the man who hit hardest, moved fastest, and stood tallest. His spear wasn't just a finisher, it was a final judgment. He was the first signal that the enforcer role could evolve, become tactical, precise, and intelligent, not just brute strength. Solo Sikoa was never formally labeled the enforcer, but that's exactly what he was. He showed up at Clash at the Castle and instantly altered Roman's trajectory. He stood in front of his brothers, kept his emotions buried, and enforced without hesitation. He was the one who fixed problems before they became disasters. He was the iron foot under Roman's table. But as Solo rose in authority, he outgrew the role. Which left a vacancy. In WWE, most muscle guys are for spectacle. Not in the bloodline. Here, the enforcer isn't background. He's the first strike. The one who makes you second-guess crossing the family. To be an enforcer, you must operate without hesitation. Inflict maximum damage. Be loyal without question. Represent the wrath of the family, not just one member. Think of it this way, Roman is the head. Solo is the spine. Jacob is the chaos. The enforcer is the fist. And now, that fist belongs to Jeff Cobb. Cobb doesn't need theatrics. His offense is built around pure efficiency. Every suplex has a snap. Every slam has intent. His finisher, Tour of the Islands, looks like someone's soul is being rotated out of their body. That's the kind of pain that gets remembered. Cobb's Olympic background adds real danger. He's not just trained to perform. He's trained to break people's bodies under the rules of international combat. And that's something WWE has rarely had in an enforcer. Cobb doesn't care about titles, social media presence, or interviews. That's not a gimmick, it's a tactical advantage. He's focused. He's controlled. And he's deadly by design. In Samoan culture, there's often a designated figure within a tribe whose role is not to lead, but to defend the honor of the leadership with force. This isn't a title given lightly. It's granted after testing, scrutiny, and spiritual blessing. And that's what we saw at Backlash. The painting. The kneeling. The silence. It wasn't performance, it was clear tribal ritual. And when Rikishi, Solo, and Roman all give some form of approval, that means Cobb isn't just acting as the enforcer. He is the enforcer, chosen by the head, the hands, and the history. The cultural legitimacy of Umaga, the athletic pedigree of Roman, the cold execution of Solo, and a global background that adds fear beyond WWE. Here's the real power behind Cobb's induction: he won't lead. He won't betray. He won't distract. He'll destroy. Whether it's Lashley, Rollins, Cody, or anyone else in his path, Cobb's role is clear: cut off escape routes. Break bodies. Enforce the silence Roman demands. And protect the structure Solo builds. This makes him a threat not just to opponents, but to anyone inside WWE who doesn't understand what the bloodline is becoming. Enforcers come and go. But every great dynasty remembers the moment their sword was sharpened. For the bloodline, that moment wasn't at WrestleMania. It wasn't when Roman returned. It was at Backlash, when Jeff Cobb stepped forward, took the mark, and embraced his role as the weapon of the legacy. And now? Every message has a consequence. Every threat has a handler. Every rebellion has a price. That price? Paid to the enforcer. Delivered by Jeff Cobb. Let's be clear. Backlash 2025 didn't just give us a surprise debut. It didn't just move the story forward. It redefined what the bloodline is. Once, they were a dominant faction. Then, they became a family torn apart. Now? They are something else entirely. Militarized. Ritualized. Strategically evolved. This is no longer just Roman Reigns' empire. This is a multi-headed machine, powered by Solo Sikoa, the silent general. Jacob Fatu, the wild chaos. And now, Jeff Cobb, the enforcer with ancestral blessing and Olympic pedigree. And at the center of it all? Legacy. Not titles. Not fame. But legacy, and the cold willingness to defend it by force. Every dominant run in WWE history goes through phases: rise, peak, fracture, reinvention. We are now witnessing Bloodline 3.0. The belts are no longer the point. The goal is control of the family name, of the culture, of the WWE ecosystem. And with Jeff Cobb, they now have the final piece of the war engine. He doesn't talk. He doesn't politic. He doesn't care about spotlight. He enforces. He destroys. And he enforces tradition as much as command. So what happens now? There's no way he ignores Solo's power plays forever. And Cobb, the man he acknowledged but did not name as his own, stands between Roman and total control. If he continues positioning himself as the voice of authority, he may force Roman into confrontation, or exile. There will come a moment when Jeff Cobb must decide, enforce for Solo, or for Roman? When that moment comes, someone will fall. And that won't just shift a faction. It'll shift the power structure of WWE entirely. Wrestling is full of debuts. Shocks. Moments that pop the crowd, trend for 24 hours, then vanish. But the ceremony at Backlash? Jeff Cobb's induction? It hit differently. Because it was rooted in respect, executed with precision, and loaded with symbolism that gave it gravity far beyond just sports entertainment. This was tribal. Spiritual. Inevitable. Cobb didn't join the bloodline. He became part of it. And with that, the message is final: there are no second chances. No loopholes. No mercy. Only legacy, and the monster sworn to protect it. Now we hand it to you. What do you think this means for the bloodline? Is Roman still in control, or has Solo quietly taken the throne? Is Jeff Cobb the greatest enforcer the factions ever had? Or is he just the calm before the real storm? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit like if you ride with the bloodline. Subscribe if you're ready for whatever civil war is about to explode in WWE. Because one thing's for sure, war is coming. And this time, it's not about who wins the match. It's about who owns the name.